are today at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center with Sean Cruzen, the director, and this is This Week in Space Science. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on our show here and to tell us all about those events that are coming up, both in outer space, on planet Earth, and at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center. So we're really happy to have you here. We've been talking about bringing you on in a new set now that we have some new equipment here in the studio. And it's one of those things that we're making some decisions about. We want to make sure that we live up to our reputation here, certainly the one at Coca-Cola Space Science Center, that we want to have a background that really kind of promotes what you're doing in outer space, but I don't want to go too far out there in outer space. You know, those sets that are just too much for us there. But we're working on it. But again, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about what's going on out there. What's on your list to start with today?
Well, it's hard to go too far with these sets because, you know, space is really kind of an amazing place, right? So it can be fancy, and that's okay. Anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff going on right over your head today, as a matter of fact. There's all kinds of things. It's a very busy day in space. It turns out that right now, the number of astronauts and cosmonauts in outer space is tied for the record for the most astronauts or cosmonauts ever to be in space at the same time.
At the same time.
And that's 13. So right now, there are a combination of 13 astronauts and cosmonauts in outer space in orbit right now. Now, let me kind of go through the summary of that. There were 3 on the International Space Station to begin with. Then, on Monday, the Space Shuttle Discovery blasted off from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center in Florida and took another 7 astronauts up. Well, about the same time, or a little bit later, actually a Soyuz craft launched from Russia with 3 more. And all of those craft are now docked at the International Space Station, making a grand total of 13 astronauts and cosmonauts up there. Now, that only ties a previous record for a number of people in space. However, among that group, there are 4 women. And that is the greatest number of women to be in space at the same time. And so this is kind of a neat thing. There was one astronaut who was already on the International Space Station who was female, and then there were 3 female astronauts who launched from Kennedy Space Center aboard Discovery and are now in outer space. So a grand total of 4 women all at the same time.
That is very amazing. You know, tell me though, how long does a person stay on the space station once they get there? How long can they stay?
You know, the rotations can be several months, and so you can have somebody up there for anywhere from 2 months to 4 months. In a rotation. It depends on the launch schedule on the ground and how that's going actually. So they're generally months long, these expeditions that are assigned to the space station. So it's a good long-term experiment. Now the crew of the Soyuz that went up, they're actually going up to replace the current space station crew.
Okay.
So the space station crew that's up there now, they'll be coming back down on the Soyuz. The people that went up on the Soyuz, they'll be staying on the space station for a while.
Okay.
And everybody who was on Discovery will be coming back down on the shuttle Discovery as well. Now, there's another record that's kind of interesting that's worth talking about as well.
Right.
One of the astronauts that went up with the shuttle Discovery was a Japanese astronaut.
Okay.
And there's a Japanese astronaut already aboard the International Space Station. So this is also the first time that Japan has had 2 astronauts in space at the same time as well. So that's another record about this very busy day taking place up there in outer space right now.
I'm thinking there's not much room on that space shuttle. Is there much room for 13 people at one time?
Well, and you know, you got to remember it's a combination of the shuttle, the International Space Station itself, which they've been adding on components and making it bigger. They're building it like a Lego, you know, a bunch of Legos. It grows, and of course the Soyuz craft as well is up there as well. So they have these 3 spaces which these astronaut cosmonaut teams are kind of moving in between as they're up visiting the space station for the next week or so.
Okay. All right. Well, that should be interesting. And then there's another launch of the shuttle in May.
There is. Right. There is. They are rapidly moving through the final portion of the shuttle scheduled shuttle flights. They're trying to complete the construction on the International Space Station and have all the shuttle flights wrapped up, with the last one going up in September. Now, the shuttle that launched this week, Discovery, it will also launch in September. So this is not Discovery's last mission. But the next two for the next two shuttles will be their last missions as they go up for Atlantis and Endeavour. That'll be their last missions. One in the middle of May, one at the end of July, and then those shuttles will be retired.
Now, there are 3 shuttles or more.
That's right. There are 3 shuttles that are in operation right now at the current time.
Okay.
So
okay. All right. Very very interesting. And then there was something about a malfunction though.
Yeah, the shuttle Discovery has what they call the main communications antenna. It's a KU band radio transmission antenna. Basically, think about it like this: it's kind of like a DirecTV or a Dish Network satellite dish that can broadcast not only just regular radio signals, but actually lots of data, a big data stream back down to the Earth. Very similar to an HD TV type signal. Well, that antenna failed. And the problem with that is they use that antenna to transmit down photographs of the exterior of the shuttle after a launch to check it to make sure that nothing struck the shuttle during the launch process and damaged any of the heat tiles or anything, to make sure the shuttle is in good repair. Now, it turns out that the space station itself has a similar transmission antenna. So they're going to be able to transmit those pictures back down to the Earth and make sure that Discovery is in good shape before they bring it back through the atmosphere. However, the antenna on the space station is slower, so that data transmission rate will be much slower. The ground team was actually out of visual communication with the shuttle crew on their flight to space. That's not a normality. Normally they have interior cockpit cameras and they keep an eye on the astronauts all the way up.
Right.
But that particular process failed because this antenna failed. So there are many systems on board the shuttle you can kind of see rely on that high data rate transmission antenna, and it failed on this particular launch.
Right, and they typically have redundancy for these systems as well. I'm surprised that they didn't have that in that case.
Yeah, apparently they don't have a redundant antenna of this variety. Now they do have other antennae which they can communicate data back down to the ground, but it's at a much slower rate than this main antenna that happened to go out. Okay,
all right. So there's now this is interesting. I saw on the list that you brought in everybody has to move eventually. We need a moving van. We need the guys with the 2 men in a truck and so forth. But the space station needs a moving van. Tell me about that.
Apparently, the space station is getting a moving van. Actually, it's a little bit less like a moving van and a lot more like, you know, those things called pods. They bring this big thing and they set it in your front yard, and then you kind of load it up with all your stuff. And then a few days later, they come back and get it and take it to your new home or to your storage unit or whatever. Something very similar to those pods was transported by the space shuttle up to the International Space Station. The pod's name was Leonardo, so this pod had a name. It was produced by the Italian Space Agency, and it was designed to carry a large amount of technical and sophisticated cargo up to the International Space Station. So the shuttle flew it up there. They're installing it now today, and they will, after they get it installed, they will start to remove all these pieces of computer hardware and supplies for the International Space Station from the big pod called Leonardo here in the next few days.
Okay, that's very interesting.
It's kind of like 2 men in a space shuttle, though. Actually,
yeah, I was tempted to say pods in space. I'm sure there's probably a science fiction movie with that as well.
I'm sure. Something
all
like
right.
That.
So what about some photos?
There was a very interesting phenomenon that took place while the shuttle has been up there docked to the International Space Station, and that's that the shuttle and the space station actually flew through an aurora borealis phenomenon. And so the aurora occurred. You actually can see these northern lights. The northern lights were visible from the International Space Station, and they flew right through them. And you can see them in this photograph, the kind of reddish-greenish colors right there. Very beautiful photograph. And what you're seeing is the shuttle and the International Space Station combined together, flying through the northern lights, the aurora borealis phenomenon. So a really neat photograph taken by one of the astronauts on the International Space Station in Expedition 23 crew. And just a really kind of interesting event that doesn't always occur that often, where you have the shuttle up there docked to the space station and there's an aurora phenomenon that they travel through.
Okay, it's probably a beautiful sight.
Very beautiful sight. If anybody's ever seen the Northern Lights before, you realize what just a really interesting phenomenon that is anyway to see. And then if you see it from the International Space Station, well, even more the better.
Okay. Now, NASA has signed another deal. What is this about?
Yeah, they've actually signed a contract for $335 million that will allow the Russian Space Agency to provide transportation to American astronauts back and forth to the International Space Station and back to the ground over the next few years. Now, the problem is that big amount of money, $335 million, only secured 6 seats. So that means these seats were somewhere on the order of $55 million per seat. That's what Russia is charging the United States.
That's what we call a big ticket item.
That is clearly a big ticket item. That's a first class ticket to space is what that is. Although I'm not really sure if you can count the Russian Soyuz as a first class mode of transportation. But anyway, the idea is that NASA had to secure these seats ahead of time to make sure that they can maintain an ongoing astronaut program with these astronauts going back and forth and visiting the International Space Station. Because had they not bought their tickets now, the Russians may have or could have possibly filled those seats with other people, and the Americans would simply have missed out on the opportunity to fly on the Soyuz capsule.
Right, and we need to do something with our phasing out of the manned space flight for the shuttles.
That's really the difficult part. Is this all fits into the same part of the plan that calls for the elimination of the shuttle program, but also calls for the elimination of the shuttle's successor, which was the Orion capsule and the whole Constellation program system. And the current administration for NASA is moving away from that idea and moving toward a more privatized space effort to take astronauts back and forth to space.
Well, I remember last week, and even in the weeks before, you talked about Buzz Aldrin and some of the moves and proposals that he's made about a manned space flight to Mars.
That's
so
right.
that we're not finished yet, but there's probably a lot of negotiation and a lot of things have to happen for that to be in place, I'm sure. Yeah,
that's very, very much true that there's a lot of negotiations and a lot of details to be ironed out. But it's kind of an interesting thing that Buzz Aldrin's really being a proponent of what NASA's doing and kind of a backer of them moving away from just trips back and forth to the International Space Station or even going back to the moon. And he's really kind of pushing this idea of maybe privatized space companies taking astronauts back and forth to the space station, while NASA focuses their attention on a long-term trip to Mars is really maybe a better idea. And as you alluded to, there's a lot of work to be done before that mission would ever be assembled, and even the spacecraft started to be worked on to carry that mission out at some point. But it is a very interesting idea, and certainly Buzz Aldrin, now that he's no longer dancing with the stars, has time to think about this and kind of consult.
I assume he was eliminated.
He did get the moon boot.
That was apparently. That was very sad, I'm sure.
Stunning that he wasn't the first one eliminated, I have to admit. But yet, not entirely surprising that he was maybe the next one eliminated.
Okay, well, maybe that clears his calendar to focus on that trip to Mars.
I hope so.
All right, Sean, you've got something about a debut launch.
There's the debut launch of a commercial rocket. This is by a company called SpaceX, and SpaceX has their rocket sitting on the launch pad down at Kennedy Space Center ready to launch. Well, their debut launch for the first stage of their rocket anyway was scheduled to be April the 12th. And just recently found out within the last 48 hours that launch has now been moved backward substantially, probably back till not before the second week of May, as it looks like right now. The reason being, there was a test that they still needed to run on it and to make sure it worked. And I find this test mildly amusing, actually. It's the test that they need to run on still is the self-destruct mechanism. Now, you remember on Star Trek, right? Every time they got in trouble, they would start setting the self-destruct mechanism. Going to blow up the ship.
And so forth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when rockets or missiles actually launch from a space center like Kennedy Space Center that's somewhere near populated areas, they have to have a radio-controlled self-destruct mechanism in case they get out of control of the launch team and start going off on their own. They can always push the big red button and basically blow up their own rocket before it has a chance to injure people or cause major damage. And so they hadn't done apparently enough systems testing on the SpaceX rocket in that area of self-destruct before they rolled it out to the launch pad, and so it's going to be delayed at least maybe a month or so.
Okay, all right. Well, we got to have that. We want to protect the people. That thing could cause a lot of difficulty there.
It absolutely could if it got off on the wrong path, no doubt about it.
All right, so you want to talk something about an asteroid?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting story, and as I sit here with you in the studio tonight, this afternoon, this is Thursday, April the 8th, and tonight is the night that an asteroid is going to pass between the Earth and the moon.
Oh.
About 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
That's a little too close for me, Sean. I'm thinking.
It's even closer than that. It's only 1/3 the distance from the Earth to the moon.
Okay.
Now, when I say this number, it's 80,000 miles, and that seems like a lot.
That's too close for me.
But yeah, that's in the sense of the scale of the solar system. That's parting our hair.
And we don't really have one of those futuristic shoot the asteroid down and so forth. We don't have those systems ready.
We do not have the systems that are much like on Star Wars or something, I guess, maybe, that would be able to blow up an asteroid as it was coming in. Now, we'd have to find this asteroid far out away from the Earth, send a craft out to meet it, and hopefully push it a little bit off course so that it would change its angle enough to miss the Earth. Right now, we simply don't have that capability.
And I'm assuming that the gravitational pull of the Earth is not going to allow this thing to come in our direction.
Well, the gravitational pull of the Earth would actually pull it in even more.
Well, that's what I mean. But I mean,
yeah,
it's not close enough.
Yeah. So no, you're right. It's going to miss us this time.
Okay.
The thing about that, though, is that NASA likes to monitor these what they call near-Earth or Earth-crossing asteroids because the Earth's gravity could alter that path of that asteroid enough that the next time it orbited the sun, it could come on something that was similar to a collision course and cause some problems for the Earth. And so they really want to keep an eye on this pass and just kind of make sure they know where it goes. Now, the asteroid, again, this doesn't sound big, but it is kind of big. It's 71 feet across. Okay. And that's a sizable enough asteroid that it would cause substantial damage on the ground if it were to hit anywhere. And so, but as it moves away from the Earth, it's going to be very hard to track. So all they can do really is get the best estimate they can for the orbital path of this asteroid as it goes around, and then they put out a report to say, watch for it next time it comes around. It may even be closer, or it may be farther away.
Okay. So there's no chance of seeing it. I guess we have pretty cloudy weather right now, but in another part of the world, could we actually see this asteroid?
With a large enough telescope, this asteroid probably could be imaged. Certainly with amateur telescopes, it would be a very difficult object, not just because it's faint, but also because it is moving, like you said before. And so a faint moving objects across the sky is a very difficult target for any kind of amateur telescope to be able to handle.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. It missed us. We're good.
Yes, that's right, and that's what we hope.
Thanks for the good news.
We hope that it continues to miss.
We appreciate that. All right, tell us something about, a little closer to home, Coca-Cola Space Science Center.
Coca-Cola Space Science Center has a lot of great stuff. This weekend, if you come down to the Space Science Center, we have our feature laser shows for this week. On Friday night, we're marking the return of Laser Beatles. If you're a big Beatles fan, you love to hear the Beatles music on a great sound system, see some very neat laser effects up on our dome, coming down on Friday night at 8 o'clock, and you can see Laser Beatles in the Omnisphere Theater throughout the rest of the month of April, actually. So that's a great show. Highly encourage people to come see that one. Then also on Saturday night in that same time slot, 8 o'clock, it's time to roll out Pink Floyd. Now, it's pretty much an honor system within the planetarium community that if you have a planetarium, you pretty much have to have a Pink Floyd show. We actually have two. We have Dark Side of the Moon, and then we also have this one, which is Laser Wall. So if you like the Wall album by Pink Floyd, you're going to love the show called Laser the Wall that we're going to be running on Saturday night at 8 o'clock.
Saturday night, 8 o'clock.
Exactly, in the Omnisphere. Now, the feature astronomy show for the month of April is called Black Holes. And if you haven't had a chance to get down to the Omnisphere and see black holes, it's a really fantastic show. It's really the graphics in it are very well done, and it goes through a very good and detailed explanation of what black holes are, how they're created, and how they may or may not interact with us right here on the planet Earth as we move around our galaxy. So a very, very interesting show and very well done. I'd highly encourage people to get down there and take a look at it.
All right, sounds good. But you've also had some things on Tuesday and Wednesday coming up as well.
Got some things next week that people need to know about, particularly here at Columbus State University. On Tuesday night, or on Tuesday, I should say, during the day, it is Tower Day here at Columbus State University.
Tower Day.
It is Tower Day, and that's the day that Columbus State University sets aside to honor its honor students and its students who are doing undergraduate research. And so there will be presentations and exhibitions taking place all across the campus on Tuesday of next week. And for that, Columbus State University's Coca-Cola Space Science Center is going to participate. We're actually going to be not closed down, but we're going to be open to the public and have just a free day at the Space Science Center. So, so whether you're CSU or not, doesn't matter who comes down, everybody gets in for free next Tuesday in honor of Tower Day, and all the festivities are going to be taking place around that particular event.
Excellent. I love it. Free is my favorite cost there. All right, and Wednesday you have something.
We do. As part of our further collaboration with the local IMAX Theater at the National Infantry Museum here in Columbus, the Coca-Cola Space Science Center is going to be going out to the Infantry Museum next Wednesday night to participate in a Columbus State University night at the IMAX. And that means if you're out there and you have a student ID or a faculty ID or a staff ID, you can take your ID down to the IMAX Theater on Wednesday night, show your ID down there, and they're going to let you into the theater for free. And you'll get to hear this brilliant speaker who's going to introduce the Hubble Space Telescope show. His name is Sean Cruzen, apparently.
Oh, I was afraid of that. There's a personal plug coming again.
That was a tongue-in-cheek brilliant, by the way.
Very Sean, we're happy to have you talk about this. You know, we love you here on the show, but you talk about so many things that we love to hear you talk more about that. And that's at the IMAX Theater.
The IMAX Theater.
On Wednesday night.
Wednesday night, we'll be there. I'll introduce the show. We'll run the Hubble 3D show. It's a great show if you haven't had a chance to see it. Then right after that show, outside, we're going to set up our telescopes from the Space Science Center and take a look at the nighttime sky. A beautiful target up that night, Venus and Mercury together in the western part of the sky. We're going to be trying to show people that with our telescopes right after that Hubble Space Telescope show in the IMAX.
That sounds like a great Wednesday night, just to break up the week, get out there and see some things. All right, IMAX Theater and your telescopes there. Also, next Saturday,
have our astronomy night at the Space Science Center. That begins at 8 o'clock indoors with our virtual tour of the nighttime sky in the Omnisphere Theater with Dr. Rosa Williams, who does a great job with that particular program. And then right after that, if it's clear outside, we're going to take you outside. We're going to set up the big 14-inch telescope along with all the other telescopes that we have out there on the flat, and we're going to show you the objects that happen to be up and visible from downtown in downtown Columbus in the nighttime sky out there. So look forward to that next Saturday night at the Space Science Center, April 17th.
Okay, April 17th. Well, that's a lot. There's a lot of things going on, but you also have this notion of summer camps coming up.
Yep, we're close enough to summer now that if you're a parent out there of a school-age child, you kind of need to be thinking about what you're going to be doing with your children for the summer. And we have a great alternative for you at the Space Science Center, which is to enroll them in one of our summer camps at the Space Science Center. We have a great lineup of summer camps for all ages from elementary through middle school. And you can look at the lineup online, get on our website, www.ccsssc.org, charlie.org. You can pull up that lineup there. It's right linked to the front page, and you can find out when the camps that are happening that would be the most age appropriate for your child. And so highly encourage people to get online and check out our summer camp lineup. It's going to be a really good time this summer with all the kids coming to the Space Science Center.
Oh, that sounds like fun. You know, I just love to do this show, Sean. You bring us so much information, you inform us about so many things going on, and I've got a special treat for you today too. And I want to just preview this because a few moments ago there was actually some of my directing mistakes, and if you watch closely, you saw Sean in one of those new sets. So here's what I want to do. I want to preview one of our new sets with you, and this is Sean. As we may broadcast him next week, coming up in this brand new set here in COEHP.TV. Here he is. He's got his 100-inch monitors over there. He's doing. He's looking quite well with that inside the spaceship.
It's so much bigger in here. I didn't realize how much bigger the studio was. The desk's a little smaller, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah,
but the room itself.
We may have to work on the size of that.
I feel like
desk.
I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise here with the lighting.
Please don't push any buttons.
Yeah, I don't want to go to warp drive at this time. That would be bad.
Well, we certainly thank you, Sean, for being with us, and we love having fun with you on this show here. It is the kind of thing that really helps us get connected with all of the wonderful things you're doing at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center, and we appreciate you being here. Thanks again, Sean, and we want to tell everyone you can see this show on our on-demand site, but watch for us each week with This Week in Space Science with Sean Cruzen.